Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." But he didn't say what awakening costs. This is the story of a man who stared so deeply into the human soul that it nearly destroyed him, and in doing so uncovered a truth most of us spend our lives trying to forget. To understand Jung's darkest truth, you have to walk beside him, into the abyss, into the very roots of the psyche, into the collective unconscious. But first, you must understand what he was escaping from. Carl Gustav Jung was not just a psychiatrist. He was the heir to Freud's kingdom, a rising star in early psychoanalysis, a golden child in the eyes of the scientific world. But something inside him was restless. Freud believed all psychological struggle could be traced to repressed sexuality. But Jung sensed something far older, something beneath even the personal unconscious, something archetypal. He began to see patterns in his patients' dreams, images of ancient gods, symbols from forgotten cultures, visions from myths they'd never read. These weren't random, they were recurring, timeless. It was as if there was a shared layer of memory embedded in the human mind, not from the individual life, but from the history of our species. Jung had a name for it, the collective unconscious. This would become his heresy, and like all heretics, he would be cast out. After the break with Freud, Jung entered what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. For years he stood at the edge of madness. He dreamt of oceans of blood, floods swallowing cities, and gods with burning eyes. He wrote in red and black ink. He drew mandalas in moments of despair. He heard voices that weren't his. Am I going mad, he wondered, or am I awakening to something real? This wasn't psychosis, it was voluntary descent, a conscious act of plunging into the unconscious to see what lived there. And what he found was not just personal trauma. It was an ancient architecture, a mythological web of symbols and archetypes, universal patterns of thought that have lived in every culture, in every age. He met the shadow, the repressed, disowned self. He encountered the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine. He crossed paths with the trickster, the wise old man, the mother, and the hero, not as metaphors but as psychological realities embedded deep in the human mind. He realized our dreams, myths, religions, they all draw from the same hidden well. That well is the collective unconscious. What is the collective unconscious? Imagine the mind as a vast ocean. Your conscious thoughts are just the surface, the part lit by the sun. Below that lies your personal unconscious, the memories, wounds, and desires you've forgotten or repressed. But beneath even that, at a depth almost impossible to reach, lies the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche you didn't create, but inherited. A psychic blueprint passed down through generations. It is the ancestral memory of the human race. You've never met a dragon, but you fear it. You've never spoken to a wise old sage, but he appears in your dreams when you're lost. You don't remember the ancient myths, but your soul seems to. The collective unconscious explains why we recognize stories we've never heard, why symbols affect us before we can explain them, why a spiral, a serpent, or a crucifix can evoke awe or terror without reason. We are not as separate as we think. Your mind is not just your own. It is the continuation of every mind that came before you. The darkest truth. Here is the part most never grasp. The collective unconscious does not only hold light, it also holds our collective shadow. Not just your shame, but humanity's. War, genocide, betrayal, abuse, cruelty, fear of the other, lust for power. These forces are not out there. They are also within, imprinted deep into the blueprint of human nature. Jung believed that ignoring this truth is what leads to true madness, both personally and societally. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every prejudice, every irrational fear, every pattern you repeat and don't understand, it might not even belong to your life. It might be ancient, inherited, collective. This is Jung's darkest truth. You are haunted not only by your past, but by humanity's, and if you do not face it, you will become it. Every one of us carries a myth, a silent narrative we live out without realizing. Some live the hero's journey, overcoming trials, seeking meaning. Others live the story of Narcissus, forever trapped in self-reflection. Some play the martyr, others the outcast, the king, the witch, the fool. These are not just literary tropes. These are psychic scripts, archetypes that shape your behavior, emotions, and choices without your consent. The collective unconscious is the stage, the archetypes are the roles, and your ego, just the actor who thinks it's writing the play. But the real author lies deeper. Carl Jung did not dive into the abyss to drown in it. He went there to return, with knowledge. And what he discovered is something most of us try to avoid, that healing is not the removal of darkness, but the integration of it. The shadow doesn't go away when ignored. It grows, it distorts, it projects itself onto others. But when we face it, we gain something extraordinary: power, clarity, wholeness. In Jung's own words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is what he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your true self by integrating the unconscious with the conscious. Not erasing what's buried, but bringing it into awareness. It is a spiritual path, a psychological path, and a mythological path, all at once. And it begins with a terrifying truth. You are not one thing. You are a multitude, many selves hidden behind one face. To reach these hidden selves, Jung turned to dreams. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams as wish fulfillment, Jung believed they were communications from the unconscious, symbols that bypassed the ego to deliver warnings, guidance, and insights. He spent years analyzing his own dreams, sketching the mandalas he saw, studying the symbols that emerged. He believed each person's dream world spoke in the language of archetypes, and that if you could learn this symbolic language, you could begin to dialogue with your unconscious. In dreams, your soul tells you what you refuse to hear when awake. The abandoned house, the wounded child, the faceless man chasing you through fog. These are not fiction. They are messages. Jung once said, dreams are the guiding words of the soul. To ignore them is to silence your inner compass. And yet, we live in a culture that has amputated its soul. We are trained to ignore our dreams, repress our emotions, numb our anxieties, and scroll endlessly to escape ourselves. We analyze everything, but understand nothing. We call myths primitive. We dismiss symbols as superstition. We ignore the unconscious and then wonder why we repeat cycles of suffering, both individually and as a society. We laugh at the gods of the past, but maybe they're still here, wearing new names, haunting new technologies. Maybe the collective unconscious didn't vanish. Maybe it's just been forgotten, buried beneath the noise of modern life. And maybe that's why we feel so empty, disconnected, unwhole. Jung believed that to save ourselves, we had to return to something older than modernity, not to regress into superstition, but to reclaim the symbolic mind, to recognize that your anxiety is not just chemical. It might be the hero resisting the call to adventure, that your depression is not just biological. It might be the death of the ego before the rebirth of the soul, that your confusion isn't madness. It might be the trickster archetype shaking you from false certainty. In myth, you are not broken. You are in the middle of a transformation. This is why Jung saw such value in alchemy, mythology, and religion, not as literal truths, but as symbolic maps of the unconscious. They show us the terrain. They help us survive the darkness. They help us integrate what we've forgotten. Carl Jung died in 1961, but his ideas live in therapy, literature, film, and art, often unnoticed, like the very unconscious he studied. When you watch Star Wars, The Matrix, Fight Club, Inception, or Joker, you are watching Jungian psychology in motion. These are not just stories, they are modern myths, echoing ancient truths. Jung showed us that the most dangerous thing is not the darkness. It is pretending it doesn't exist. That facing the abyss is not descent into madness, but the first step toward healing. So where does this leave you? Ask yourself, why do certain images haunt me? Why do I repeat the same patterns? Why do I feel older than my own life? The answers may not lie in logic or language. They may lie deeper, in the collective past buried beneath your skin. Carl Jung once walked into the abyss and returned with a gift, A mirror, not to show you who you are, but who you could become, if only you had the courage to look. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens.